podcast today. I really appreciate your time. And I wanted to kind of catch up with you and learn a little bit about your experience in the world of ed tech, and specifically in customer success, and kind of get your background, your experience. And all of my episodes with this podcast kind of focus under the umbrella of communication. And the title of the podcast is Lines of Communication. So I like to try to talk with people from different backgrounds, different career fields, and sort of see how they incorporate communication in their roles. And then also for you, with your experience in getting into customer success, I wanted to learn a little bit about maybe insight that you've gained over your time that you can kind of help with other people. And I think about it in terms of like other people telling their story, right? How do they communicate their story, and if they want to kind of transition and sort of follow in footsteps that you did. So that's kind of the angle I'd like to take with you today. But maybe to start, could you just tell us a little bit about your background and kind of how you got into ed tech and customer success?
Absolutely. I'm so excited to be here. I am a huge proponent of communication in general, but also the right kind of communication. And I think in some ways that's a bit of a lost art form as we've come across the ages. So so I actually, my BA is in theater and dance, so worlds away from ed tech, but definitely in the vein of communication there. It's storytelling and, creating that audience experience, leaving them with a certain feeling or a thought or a call to action at the end of their time with you. From there, I did the actor thing. I moved around the country and did musicals, and oh gosh, that does not pay the bills. So of course, as any good actor does, I worked at Starbucks for a while, found myself in supervision there, and then ended up in a medical clinic, front office staff there, ended up in supervision there, and then went into an admin role with a Fortune 500 insurance company and ended up in a business consulting role there. And that was my first, I'll say my first real dabble into imposter syndrome, where I was like, I'm just organized and I like talking to people. And now I'm going to help like multi-million-dollar generating revenue insurance agents and their teams like make a business plan for the whole year. But truthfully, it comes down to communication. It's knowing how to talk to people of all different types, of all different backgrounds. It's checking your ego during communication a lot of the times. Because how often do we blindside ourselves to further communication because we've gotten offended and there's the miscommunication of it all.
Well, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that kind of reminded me. I was talking to somebody recently, and we were kind of talking about how no matter what field you're in, communication also involves the listening part of communication too, right? Which I know is a big deal in the world of customer success, but in anything is like you often forget about that, and you think, well, communication, I have to be the strongest voice or the most impactful or whatever, and you forget that it's sort of a two-way thing of, in order to communicate, you also have to be able to listen too. And I think that kind of reminded me what you were just touching on right there.
Yes, absolutely. And that is such an important point that I'm sure we'll circle back to later on in the world of customer success. Ultimately, that business consulting, I loved the work I was doing, but the environment just wasn't for me. It was a very traditional organization and its hierarchy and kind of politics. So my artistic nature needed something a little more, what my husband refers to sometimes as hippy dippy. Okay. So I left, I finished my master's in organizational leadership and executive coaching. And then I just spent some time looking, and I truthfully was not looking to be in customer success. I didn't really know what it was, but I knew that where I had come from had given me a really clear idea of what I wanted my day-to-day to look like. And so my job search was really about what skills are they looking for, and do I like their job description? Do I like their website? Do I like the verbiage that they're using? And I stumbled across a posting from an ed tech company. And one of my hard lines was I want to work remotely. I
Mhm.
just, I really enjoyed online grad school, and I really just wanted that flexibility. So on remote.co, I think was the website, I stumbled across a posting, and as I was reading it, like I was just smiling so big. I was like, these are my people. Like they are serious, and I can tell that they love what they do, but they're a little bit silly. They don't take themselves too seriously. Like I got to get in on this. And I actually applied first for one of their I don't even revenue and operations team. So it was much more of the back end of, cleaning up data, making sure Salesforce is, working correctly, turning on and off access, things like that.
Mhm.
Because I love to organize information, and I was like, this is it. And I got through all the interviews. I had my final interview with that team, and they're lovely people. Totally incorrect personality fit. If you can't tell, like I'm waving my hands around. I talk with my hands. I'm a theater person, right?
Right,
And
right.
after that interview, my husband said, "How did it go?" And I said, "I think they are exhausted from my energy." So,
A little more straight-laced, I'm imagining, huh?
yeah, just much more reserved, happy to just, you know, go a day without maybe talking to too many people. And
Yeah.
um the final like flourish on this experience was when the hiring manager came back and said, "Here's the thing, we really don't think you're a fit for this role, but we think you're still a fit for our company. Will you talk to the customer success manager?" And the intention behind ensuring that you don't just have qualified people, but qualified people in the right fit
Mhm.
was truly just revolutionary to me.
Yeah.
Instead of being like, well, she could do much better in this other place, but we're going to use her because she
Yeah.
could learn how to, do what we need her to do. So
Yeah.
that was my happenstance into the world of ed tech.
Well, I mean, that's great to hear that, whatever whatever you brought to that interview and everything, clearly they recognize the potential, the skill, and you're right. That's really cool of companies to do that, and hopefully that's happening out there in the world too, where you do an interview and they'll sort of recognize that, hey, this skill set might be better applied to something else, because again, that's a testament to you. And a lot of times when you're applying for jobs, like you kind of have an idea what you think the job is or what the job description says, and you may even not even realize that it's not the best fit for you as well. So I think
Right.
that's cool that that worked out, for you. But I'm curious to hear, as you were going through that process, and you touched on your interest, your diverse background, right? You
Yeah.
didn't come from, a sales background like a lot of customer success people do, and kind of work your way up the sales pipeline or whatever. But I'm curious about the theater side of it, and you kind of talked a little bit about that. But what does that kind of bring to you in terms of you sort of feeling comfortable telling your story in a way that incorporates that, and it doesn't come across as a, I don't know, like a detriment of like, yeah, like I did this other thing, where you're not trying to cover it up, but say, hey, this is kind of who I am and this helps me in this way. But how did you kind of translate some of that in terms of the jobs that you were applying for?
Yeah. Great question. I'm a firm believer that any skill you learn in any industry, anywhere, at any time in your life can transfer if you just know how to frame it or apply it. So
Mhm.
things like, we were a remote company, this ed tech company, we are a remote company. So things like, I know how to be on camera and how to present myself in a way that like you don't feel like we're that disconnected. There's that energy sharing that sometimes you miss when you're not in the room with the person.
Right.
Um, I love presenting. And so, but sometimes customer success roles include a lot of training. And so I was full hog, like, yes, I want to train teachers. I want to be out there. I want to help them. I want to get them excited about things. Um, the specificity of process as well. So you don't really think about this in theater all the time, but you have to memorize a script.
Mhm.
And like legally, you are supposed to know it word for word. You can't paraphrase, you can't like
Yeah.
make it up on the fly. Um, and so there is a really process driven part of that world that, mounting a show is the same. You rehearse, you learn, you mess up, you learn, you get coaching all the time from
Mhm.
directors. So you have to know how to take feedback well and then apply it immediately. And also I call it the backstage, on stage conundrum. Like, my customers are my audience. They don't need to know what is happening backstage internally. I just need to make sure that at the end of our time together, they think, feel, and will do what we all agreed to do in our time together.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. It's an interesting way to kind of bring that in. And you're right. It's like when you're sitting there, over a video chat or on the phone or whatever with a customer or a teacher or administrator or something like that. Um, yeah, you're right. Like what they care about is, okay, what does Liz have to say? How can she kind of help us, do what we need to do at our school and our organization? And from your perspective, you might have 800 things happening, that
Yeah.
you're trying to sort through, or other issues. And you're right, as long as you can kind of dial it in and focus on just this one thing right here, this is my most important thing at the moment. I'm sure that goes a long way, in terms of the relationship building and the service aspect of what you do,
Yeah.
much like it does. There could be chaos in the back. Costumes aren't working, people are forgetting their lines, props are broken, and no
Yep.
matter what, you've got to get out there on stage and you got to deliver your lines and do your part to make sure that everything moves. And the audience isn't going to know anything about that. They just want to see the show and take part
Yeah.
in it, and kind of get something out of it in that way. So I think that's an interesting connection right there.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear about any, like you mentioned, like imposter syndrome a little bit ago.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear any kind of roadblocks that you've come across in your time that you've kind of overcome or figured out how to work with, as you've kind of made this transition into customer success.
Yeah. Wow. Great. Excellent question. Um, I don't have a background. Like, I've never taught in a school. Have no, I went to school. That's about all I've got going for me there. Um, so when I first joined, I was hired along with another gal who's a former teacher.
Mhm.
And so, first of all, find your buddy. And it can be anybody in the organization, whether they're brand new or they've been there for a while. Find your person, because I would just be like, they threw out 3 acronyms on my last customer call and I just smiled and nodded. What do these mean? But the other thing I've really, really learned is that, especially when you're talking to educators or people in the education field, the transparency of, I'm not quite sure what you're talking about. Could you give me a little more information about that?
Yeah.
Goes such a long way. I mean, in essence, these are the people that are lifelong learners, or just their every day is dedicated to learning. And so having that humility to say, I'm not quite sure about the answer to your question, but I'm going to go back to my resources and send it to you tomorrow morning. Is that okay with you? It just, it goes such a long way. The acronyms, oh my goodness, we have got like a 15-page document internally of like acronyms,
uh,
and some of them are the same, but they mean different things.
yeah.
So I was really, really worried about coming across as a fraud or as someone that couldn't help the people that I was talking to. But I think with any role, and especially with customer success, they're going to tell you what they need. So it's either I know exactly how to help them right now in this moment, or I know exactly how to figure out how to help them,
Right.
and I will follow up and make that happen.
Yeah.
So you don't have to go in knowing all the answers. You just have to go in willing to listen and follow through.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, and I think something to call out is that customer success is different at every organization. So at the EdTech company I'm with, we've just gone through some acquisitions. And so the companies that are all now under one umbrella had very different roles and responsibilities for CSs. Some CSs were actually like renewal managers as well. So they were, their metrics were based on renewals and customer relations, but customer relations that led to renewals. But now we are firmly just the relationship people. We have absolutely no sales metrics on our plates. And that is a space I love being in, because I can look at an admin on a call and say, listen, you just purchased this product. Thank you so much. We're so excited for your partnership. I literally couldn't sell you anything if I wanted to. I'm just here to make sure that the why of the product purchase happens for your school or your district in the next 12 months.
Right.
Let's talk about how that's going to happen. And so it's this really nice, safe space for them to be open and transparent about their needs or their challenges or their goals, without feeling like, if I mention that we're struggling over here, she's going to try to sell me this other thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear, because, I'm certainly not an expert in customer success or anything like that, but it does seem like there often is that sales component tied to it, where it's like, hey, we want to make sure this district uses our product, but we also want to make sure you buy the next tier or whatever.
Right.
And I can see, like for me, I'm not a huge salesperson really, but I am more of a relationship person. And so hearing you talk about that is cool to hear, that there's customer success roles like that for people who, maybe they're scared off by the sales thing, or like in your case, like maybe you didn't come from the sales background and it doesn't really matter, because you know how to talk to people and you know how to offer that service and that support, which, again, I can imagine if you flip it around, if I'm an administrator at a school district or a school or something, you're right. I don't want to have to be sorting through a sales pitch of something. I want to just know, okay, how do I get this thing rolling and use this in our school so that it makes sense for us, and I can ask questions without having, that follow-up of, oh yeah, I see, well, you guys could benefit from this product.
Right, exactly.
That's, and that, some people might respond to that, but I could see a lot of people are just kind of like, no, I just want to get this thing working. And so anyway, I think that's kind of cool. And then, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I was curious to hear you talk a little bit about, I call it kind of like the language that you speak, right? Like you mentioned the acronyms and all this stuff where you're kind of like, I don't know what all these things mean, but I'll kind of, and like anything, you figure it out, but I'm curious, like if there's anything else you could add to kind of like, what's that language you speak in customer success, and how might that be different with, different audiences that you encounter in your day-to-day?
Yeah. I have 500 thoughts right now and I need to pick one of them. So the language we speak, again, I think I'm fortunate to be at a company where there's really no like businessese that is expected of us. I have literally sent out emails and been like, I've been trying to get you on a call to talk about your usage. Like, I know times are super busy, but here's a picture of my cat and my cat is waiting for you to respond to this email. Like anything I can throw at you to like get your attention because I know you're busy, I'm going to go there. So we have the freedom to be ourselves, which is really important to me. And I think I'm just going to call it out now. If you're looking for a new position and that's important to you, ask that question in your interview. Like, how do you encourage your employees to, follow processes and do the job they're supposed to do, but also bring their full selves to work? So one thing that we are admittedly still really working on, struggling with a bit, is because we've acquired a couple different companies, is having the same verbiage for everything. So for like one of our products, they're called super users. Another one, it's a subscription manager. And so we're looking to streamline our verbiage to be like, okay, what is this called and what does it mean all the time? And then knowing too that there's always going to be, just like the admins are giving me things I don't know what they're talking about, I might throw out something they don't know what I'm talking about. Like we have an internal platform where we can create little videos to walk them through things. And if I say, hey, you know what, I'm going to send you a Loom video to da-da-da-da, and they're like, I could just say video. So yeah, the language is a hard question to answer, I think, because the language should be your own.
Mhm.
Um, all that to say, customer success in its essence, at least the way we do it at our organization, is all about curiosity. We can have all the best practices under the sun in our brain ready to go with any customer call, but I need to dive in deep enough to know what specifically is going to work for your district right now with what's happening. Your district could be like, you know what, we haven't had a COVID outbreak in 6 months, everything's up and running, we're back to normal. I just want my teachers to get to 80% usage of this. Excellent. But I have to get the right questions out to get that information.
Right.
And you may have a district that I reach out, I'm like, hey, let's talk about your usage. And they say, we had a hurricane, we've been out of school for 2 months. Excellent. Okay, we'll table that. We'll table that. So discovery questions, if I can go down a little rabbit hole here.
Sure.
I highly, if you're super interested in customer success, or you're just interested in the art of communication, I highly recommend looking into coaching or coaching books. There's a book called The Solutions Focus. The author is escaping me at this point, but it's a way to speak in a solutions focused way. And a lot of times we go, oh, we're having these problems and this is wrong and this is a problem and I'm frustrated with this. And so just having that practice of flipping it around and saying, excellent, I hear that you're having a problem with teacher engagement with this tool. In an ideal world, what does teacher engagement look like in 1 month? Okay, perfect. Have you had an issue with this in the past that you were able to overcome? Talk me through how you were able to overcome that. How can we replicate that in this situation? So it's the art of asking powerful questions that let the other person realize they have the answers within them the whole time. We've just kind of got to play, coach, therapist, whatever, to pull it out and make the plan with them.
Do you think that's something that, like, does your organization kind of formally coach you guys on that? Like when you're kind of doing your onboarding and you're just getting started in a customer success role, is that kind of part of the training for you guys? Is like, hey, here's some questions you can ask, or is that something that you just sort of organically kind of figured out?
Yeah, both. So I was lucky enough that my master's was in coaching. And so as we've gotten to where our organization is with customer success as it exists today, we started doing this discovery training and coaching. And so we review calls. I have a team of 6 and I go in and review all their customer calls. And I'm like, oh, that was a really good opportunity for you to ask more questions about that. Like, oh, we have training, we have PD in August and we only have 3 hours. So, we're looking at that. Okay, what's most important in those 3 hours?
Right.
Does your union allow for asynchronous training where the teachers could do it on their own time? Are you really strictly in, these 3-hour guidelines? There's so much stuff to just squeeze out of people. So yes, and it's something brand new for our team, and it does take practice. And I think too, the people that gravitate to customer success and or the people that are in education, maybe looking to gravitate into customer success, you are all helpers by nature. You want to help, you want to teach. And so sometimes it takes that practice to not just jump in with the solution, but to stop and ask those deep discovery questions to say, I have a solution, but I really want to make sure it is the right solution for you before I offer that up or we put this in play.
Right. Well, and sometimes too, like looking at that from like a teacher's perspective, sometimes there's that tendency to want to just sort of jump in and give a student an answer or, explain something because it makes sense to you and it's kind of what I'm supposed to do. But sometimes sort of stopping and asking those questions, those probing questions, in sort of a little bit of a different way, but also similar in the sense that you're trying to kind of get that information from the student in this case and sort of see how well they understand what it is that they're trying to get out of it, instead of just sort of jumping in and saying, all right, this is the answer, or like in your case, this is the thing you need to do now, just do this. It's more
Right.
a little
Right.
bit of that, enabling people, right? Of
Yeah.
kind of understanding what they need, and what they're, what information they're trying to process, because there's almost, it kind of goes back to that old adage of like, you can catch someone what is it, like, you catch someone a fish and you feed them
Yeah.
for a day, you teach them to fish and you feed them for a lifetime. Like,
Right.
in a weird
Right.
way, like, you're kind of trying to do that, so that,
Yeah.
when your district or whatever comes across another issue a month from now, you've already kind of given them some of those steps to take, to where maybe
Mhm.
they don't have to reach out to you or to, technical support or something like that. They've already got those little tools in their toolkit, so to speak. So
Yeah.
kind of some interesting
100%.
distinctions.
Yeah. And it empowers them too, even with a student, if you just say this is the right answer, instead of saying, tell me how you got to the answer that you got to, so that we can identify the breakdown and then coach from there.
Right.
Um, it's much more of a partnership
Yeah.
in the exploration of how to get from A to Z.
Yeah.
And both parties, I think, really just respond better to that.
Yeah. 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 No, I think you're right. I think you're right. And again, kind of going back to what we were talking about with stripping the sales part out of it, it's like having that understanding that, hey, we're both kind of in this together. It's not me sort of trying to leverage something over you
Right.
or anything like that, which kind of helps open even that kind of communication playing field a little bit.
Yeah.
Have you noticed in your time, has your style changed at all? I mean, it sounds like you're pretty genuine regardless, but have you kind of found, oh, you know what, maybe I need to kind of tweak my communication style when I'm doing this part of my job versus this part of it? Or even like you kind of mentioned internally as well, there's kind of that internal communication aspect of it. But have you noticed any kind of changes in yourself in terms of your communication style?
Yes. I don't know that this is the best representation of it, but I have become more succinct in my life.
Okay.
Um, and I think that comes from the practicing of discovery questions and learning. Like I need to let the customer do most of the talking, because that's where I'm going to get the information to provide the most value for them. I can throw out resources right and left or suggestions on how to do things, but that can be so overwhelming, and they're already so overwhelmed. It is my goal in life to make people's lives easier.
Right.
So if I can pinpoint and just give one directive or one suggestion, that is going to make their lives easier, and in return hopefully mine as well.
Mm-hmm.
So succinctness in conversation for sure. um there's definitely a little bit more of humility, and this is definitely a culture thing. So the position I had before um really didn't leave room for you to fail or to be wrong. It was a culture of fear, and not that there weren't wonderful people there that was invested. It's just, culture is its own entity. It's
Right.
not necessarily one person doing it. And it's the hardest thing in a workplace to change. It takes years, it takes blood, sweat, tears, turnover, all kinds of things. So the organization I'm with now, I still have my moments where I'm like, I have this huge favor to ask. I asked that of one of my team members yesterday. I said, I have a huge favor to ask. And then I made the ask and she said, sure. And she said, P.S., that is an extra small favor. So it's little things like just being clear with what you want and knowing like we're all here to support each other
Yeah.
has really it's made me a lot braver in conversations that sometimes might be difficult.
Mm-hmm.
um as a helper, I don't like confrontation. Um,
Yeah,
as a
I'm with you on
manager, yeah,
that.
yeah,
I echo
exactly.
you on that. Yeah, which is weird because as a teacher, like, you're kind of met with confrontation all the time, and it's like, yeah, like I want to avoid that, but I hear you on that for sure.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And so just having the space to and honestly, for about a year of my career, in CS, I said, I don't want to be a manager. I don't want to manage people because I don't want to have those conversations. I just don't. But now I love it. I love it because we have been empowered to have conversations in a way that, get the job done, get the point across, but also empower the person to grow and learn that like we make mistakes, but we keep going from that.
Mhm.
And that is something that I just feel so deeply about. Um, so yeah, my language style has changed in that I'm more direct than I used to be, and sometimes, apparently not today, more succinct.
Hey, but you know what? You're saying what you want to say. That's what I love about the podcast format is you have conversations,
Right.
and it doesn't have to be a, a 5-minute thing. You can talk and say what you want to say, and that's what I love about it.
Exactly.
Well, you kind of touched on, I was going to ask you about that transition into now the managerial role. And, you kind of touched on just being succinct, having sometimes those uncomfortable conversations, but, in terms of communicating via, in with your manager hat on compared
Yeah.
to the other way around which is kind of how you started customer success. And so, yeah, I mean, like you just said, kind of just figuring out how to get my message across, and and knowing when you have to, kind of have that tough one-on-one conversation, I'm sure is something that takes a little bit of time to get used to,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like I just told you, I'm somebody who, if I was in that role, would feel uncomfortable probably, telling one of my peers essentially like, hey, you know what, you got to pick this up, or you got to do a little bit better in here, because at some point you're going to have
Yeah.
to do that. Not everything is going to be high fives and things like that.
Right. Well, and I think that goes right back to the discovery and the coaching questions. It's internal and external. So, um, going to an employee of mine and saying, hey, you know what? Tell me about your time management skills. I've noticed you've missed a couple meetings in the last couple weeks. I see they're on your calendar. I know that you're in office that day. So, tell what's going on.
Right.
What are you struggling with? What can I help with? What can I support with?
Hmm.
And that was something. So I just became a manager in March, mid-March of this year,
Hmm.
after a 4-month maternity leave. So we just jumped right back in with both feet. But it was very important to me to listen before I gave any directives. And so the first couple weeks, I sent out a survey to say, how do you like to be communicated with? If I have feedback, do you want it ahead of time to process, or are you good on the fly? Um, how do you like to be celebrated? In essence, one of my reports said my love language is words of affirmation. I
Hmm.
said, that's excellent to know. Now I know that that's something I can do for you to make sure you feel valued in this organization. Um, but especially having been on leave during a lot of change within the organization, there was nothing in me that wanted to come back and say, this is how we're doing things.
Right.
And so even more so in a managerial role, I find that humility is top of what I have to don every day.
Yeah.
It's looking at my team and saying, that was the incorrect thing. I'm so sorry. And doing it in front of other managers too. So in front, we're remote. We use Slack to chat back and forth. And
Right.
you'll get a message from another department saying, hey, X, Y, and Z happened. I've CC'd your employee on it. And me jumping in and saying, that's on me. I told them to do that. I didn't know the workflow had been updated. Let's get together and I'll figure it out and bring it back to my whole team. And there's no shame in that. And I think
Mhm.
that's something that's really missing in a lot of positions these days. So
Yeah.
engage with courage.
Well, yeah, and kind of we talked about it a couple times, but a little bit of that feeling of imposter syndrome when you're doing something new, there can be that feeling of like, I have to know everything exactly. And even like, okay, now you've been doing your role in customer success, you've been doing well enough to get promoted. So you have this job here in a manager role, and you could be thinking, oh God, like what am I doing in a managerial? Like, how I can't
Yep.
manage people, even if you're thinking that. You know, there's that reminder too, or I guess that comfort of being like, oh shoot, I guess it is okay to not know something, you know. And
Yeah.
again, bringing it back to like teaching too, it's like, you know, you think when you first start teaching, you have to have all the answers. And, you know, there are
Mhm.
times when you have to tell your class, ah, crap, yeah, I screwed up, you know, like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
on me. And like sometimes it is embarrassing, but it is part of
Yeah.
that give and take, because there are people that push forward and they're like, no, I did it right, or you know, I'm right in this. And that can kind of impede those, you know,
Yeah.
create some communication barriers and things like that as well. And I
Yeah.
thought it was interesting too to hear how you kind of talk about, you know, your team, and understanding that like everybody kind of has a little bit of a different style, and so they're not going to respond, you know, some people are going to respond to a, you know, a tough talk, right? Some people are going
Yeah.
to be a little bit more nurturing and care.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important too. And because, you know, you always sort of think about the flip side is, okay, when I've had to get feedback from my boss or my manager in the past, you know, I know kind of what works for me. And not every, sometimes people forget that, right? Some people
Yeah.
kind of think, you know, this is the style that's going to get results or whatever, and you sort of lose track of, you know, understanding, wait, what's the best for this individual person, you know.
Yes.
um, and it
Yeah.
reminds me too of like when I was playing baseball in college, my coach at the time, he was really good about kind of understanding his players, and it always stuck with me, I think, years removed, not only when I've coached baseball myself, but when I've had other professional roles of, you know, his thing was like, you know, we had our rules and we had our expectations, and they were kind of the same across the board, but there was also that give and take of like understanding a guy, you know, maybe if he did, you know, show up late or something like that, there was that understanding of like, hey, this guy's not going to benefit from being yelled at. This guy's
Right.
earned a little bit of flexibility, and like there's kind of that, I don't know, I guess that awareness, which I think is really good to have. And then something that I've always kind of kept in mind for myself as well, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a manager like that at Starbucks, and the way that she would approach each person differently, knowing like you're a student, you're a working mom, you're, single, can pick up a shift whenever you want.
Yeah.
And end of the day, yes, the base expectations are the same, but it's just, again, keeping that personality in there and honoring people for who they are
Yeah.
before the work that you expect them to do. The
Mhm.
work will come if they feel comfortable and empowered to do the work as who they are.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, I want to be mindful of your time, but I wanted to throw out one last question at you,
Yeah.
and you know, sort of thinking about all the teachers out there, and I'm
Yeah.
specifically teachers because, you know, your role in ed tech, you're probably, you're getting a lot of teachers who kind of approach you and your organization who are like, well, you know, I want to kind of make that transition and jump in on that side of things, which is a very logical transition for a lot of for a lot of people. But I
Mhm.
guess if you're kind of speaking to all those people out there who want to get into customer success, think that they kind of have the, you know, the personality fit, the background, whatever it is, what
Mhm.
can you kind of say to guide them along in terms of like helping them, you know, tell their story and articulate what it is about them that kind of fits best in a role like yours?
Yeah. I mean, I'll start with kind of the basics that you might have heard before, but just doing your research. So if there's a job description that really excites you, pulling keywords from that job description into your resume or your cover letter to, it's just like mirroring someone when you're talking to them in a conversation. You want to mirror what they're looking for in, the screen or the piece of paper that you can put in front of them before they meet your
Yeah.
dynamic personality. Um, And then in terms if I mean, I would always send a cover letter because that is where you could you can tell your story best. A resume is, you know, little succinct. It is what it is.
It's hard. Yeah.
Um,
I've learned personally, it's hard to kind of share who you are in bullet points. You know what I
exactly,
mean?
exactly.
Like
Yes.
not everybody kind of fits into bullet points. And I think it takes a lot of work to kind of get your best message across in that way. But I agree with you. I think that cover letter is a good chance to just sort of say what you want to say, you know?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, and then I mean, LinkedIn is a great resource. That's how we got connected.
Yeah.
Reach out to a customer success manager at the place you're interested in. Just, you know, what does your day to day look like? What are you learning in your role right now? Like right now, we're doing discovery and coaching about asking powerful questions. So, you know, maybe that's something you can brush up on or find a course on Udemy or whatever. Um, and I will say this, it is tough out there right now to break into ed tech customer success for teachers.
Right.
We've had a couple open positions. I mean, that's literally hundreds to thousands of applicants for one.
Right.
So, don't get disheartened,
Yeah.
disheartened, all
Just
of the disses. Um,
don't
no,
lose your heart. Yeah.
yeah, don't lose your heart. It's a really tough field right now.
Yeah.
But some of the things that I've seen set people apart is there's tons of customer success like courses out there.
Mhm.
If you have the means and the time, just to hop on one of those and then throw it on your resume. Like I've done the work to at least dip my toe into what the world of customer success looks like or feels like in practice.
Mhm.
Um, and then if you get that face-to-face interview, I know nerves get the best of us,
Mhm.
but you're just chatting. You're just chatting. Ask questions of your interviewer, you know, show that you're interested in them as a person. Because if I'm sitting on the other side of the table, I'm going, look at this connection we have. They're going to do this with our customers.
Mhm.
This is what we need on our team.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to kind of follow that up and thinking about, you know, I'm sure you do a lot of interviews now in your role, and like maybe you don't have specifics, or maybe you do, but like I'm thinking about what would be a question or an interaction that maybe you've had recently where it really kind of piqued your interest of like, oh yeah, this is somebody who I could see doing this with an administrator, you know, like does anything come to mind for
Yeah.
you as far as like an interaction you've had where you're kind of like, yeah, this is what we're looking for, and maybe I can't exactly articulate it, but I really liked, you know, that part of our interview or our conversation.
Yeah. Um, I had a candidate who is now on my team, truthfully. She just from the get-go was like, I'm always going to be honest with you. I'm a person that's always going to ask questions. If I don't know what you're talking about, I'm going to ask. And I'm like, yes, please. Absolutely. You know, she had done the work to shadow someone in our organization. She was an internal, you know,
Mhm.
application, but she had done the work to reach out and shadow someone, so she knew what our day to day looked like. She had really good questions about expectations, and I want to make sure that I am a good fit as well. And keep that in mind.
Right.
You are interviewing them just as much as they are interviewing you. I know sometimes you get to that place where you're like, please, anyone out there, just something different than what I have right now. I get it. And teachers, especially, you have all of our empathy and love right now. But make sure that you feel a good vibe after the interview as well. And if you don't, go ahead and just send them a note and say, thank you so much for your time. I don't think this is going to be a good fit for either of us.
Yeah.
That will go such a long way. And if you ever wanted to apply for the same organization, maybe a different role, I guarantee someone will have noted that and it will come up that like you're an intentional person who knows what they want.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I hear that advice a lot from people, you know, LinkedIn or just different things, is that idea of like, you're also interviewing your prospective employer, which sometimes is something that might be easier said than done, because you're right. A lot
Right.
of job seekers are just trying to put on their best face, you know, like I can fit this role.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of almost a communication skill in itself, is like, how do you sort of play the role as interviewer in a way, and what kind of questions
Yeah.
do you ask? And some of that comes from just experience of, you know, doing interviews and stuff like that. But I think that's definitely some input that I hear a lot from
Yeah.
the job seeking kind of world out there. So,
Mhm.
well, Liz, I really appreciate your time. I know you've got other business to take care of and everything like that. But I appreciate you joining me and sharing your experience. And and I know there's other people out there who will benefit from hearing, your story and some of your insight and everything like that. And that's really what I'm trying to do here, is just, put some content out in the world that people can connect with and latch onto. And I
Yeah,
think you've been really insightful, and I think it's really been great to catch up with you and get some of your input.
absolutely. I'm so thankful for our time here and for what you're doing out there. Communication is key. Keep talking, keep listening.
All right, Liz. Well, thanks for your time, and we'll catch up with you later on. Okay.
Great. Thank you.